Lesson 1-4, Concept 1, Adding and Subtracting with Unlike Denominators. So when we are adding or subtracting two fractions that have different denominators, it can be pretty difficult to figure out what the answer is. One thing I want to make sure everyone understands is that the answer to 1/2 plus 1/3 is not 1/5. All right? You cannot just add straight across for the denominators. It doesn't work like that. Okay? If we look at this visually, all right, here I have 1/2 a pi, and here I have 1/3 of a pi. All right, if I combine them together, I have almost a whole pi, but it's really hard for me to say exactly how much I have. All right, so what I have to do is I have to cut these slices into smaller equal pieces so that I can say, okay, I've got a certain number of these, a certain number of pieces in this one, and a certain number of pieces in this one. They're all the same size, so I have however many of those size pieces, and that's the way that we combine them. All right. So there's two ways to do that. The first way is to multiply the denominators together to find that common denominator, and the common denominator is going to be basically the size of those pieces that you're cutting them into. All right. So if I have this problem, 6 and 4, I'm just going to take 6 times 4, and that gives me 24, and this is going to be a common denominator. So both of these numbers, I can multiply them by something, and they will equal 24. And when you're using this method, you're always going to be multiplying them by each other. So 4 times 6 is going to be 24, and 6 times 4 is going to be 24. All right, same thing for this one, except it's going to be more difficult. 7 times 131 is going to get me, let's see, 7 times 3 is going to be 21. 7 times 1 is 7, plus the 2, 917. So that's quite a large denominator, all right? But it was pretty fast for me to get it. It would take a long time for me to try and figure out if these have a different, smaller common denominator. And I can use 917. It just is going to be a little bit more math and a little more complicated. Okay, the second way is going to be to find the least common denominator, and that's the smallest number that both numbers have in common. And the way you do that is by finding the factors. So if I list the factors, find the multiples. So if I list the multiples of 6, I'm going to have 6, I'm going to have 12, I'm going to have 18, I'm going to have 24, all right? And I could keep going, but at this point I should have enough. If I list the the multiples of 4, I'm going to have 4, 8, 12, 16, and that's probably enough. So we can already see that although we found a common denominator here, all right, we have a smaller common denominator. We have 12 as a common denominator because 6 times 2 is 12 and 4 times 3 is 12. All right, this way will be faster if you can do it in your head. If you list all of them out, it might take a little bit longer, but you'll have less math to do and smaller numbers to work with. When you have a problem like this, listing out all the multiples until you find a common one is going to take way too long. All right, so if you ever have numbers that are either really different, right? So one's pretty small and one's very large, listing out the multiples is going to take a long time, and you should make sure that you are using the first method, okay, just multiplying them together. All right. So once you have your common denominators, all right, your goal is going to be to multiply your fractions by a number so that so that your denominators turn into that common denominator. All right. A fraction that's equal to 1 is anything that has the same number on the top as it does on the bottom. 2 over 2 simplifies to 1. 7 over 7 simplifies to 1. 131 over 131 simplifies to 1. All right. Anything with the same numerator and denominator. So when I have my problem, and I'll use this one, all right, because we did it up here and because I know the multiples of 4 and 6, at least the smaller ones, I know that 12 is going to be my lowest or my least common denominator. So I need to multiply each by a fraction equal to 1 that's going to give me 12 as a denominator. So for 6 times 2 is going to be 12, so I want to multiply this by 2 over 2. And for 4, 3 times 4 is going to be 12, so I want to multiply this by 3 over 3. Okay, I do my multiplication. 3 times 1 is 3. 3 times 4 is 12. Minus 2 times 1 is 2. 6 times 2 is 12. And now it's pretty easy for me to do this math, right? 3 minus 2 is 1 over 12. For this next fraction, there is one trick to use when you are looking at finding a common denominator or the least common denominator. And that is if you're not sure about the denominators, if they're numbers that you don't really know the multiples of. One easy way to check to see if your smaller denominator is a factor of your larger denominator is to just divide by it. And this is where a calculator is great. So I take 91 divided by 13, and I can actually do this on my computer so you guys can see it. So 91 divided by 13, and we can see that 13 is a factor of 91, and the number I'm going to have to multiply it by is 7. So with that knowledge, I know that I can keep this denominator where it is. 91 is actually going to be my least common denominator, and I could just multiply by 7 over 7. 7 times 13 is going to be 91. 7 times 11 is going to be 77. Plus 21 over 91. And that is going to be 98. So 98 over 91. And remember, the last thing you have to do is simplify. Okay, so I'm going to be able to pull 1 out of there. 98 minus 91 is going to be 1 and 7/91. And actually, because I know that 13 times 7 is 91, I know I can simplify this because I know 7 is a factor of 91, and if I divide both the top and the bottom by 7, I'm going to equal 1 and 1/13. And that's it.